Transportation is a very important part of history. From carriages to cars, it has always been very important to people who had to travel far to get places. It always has been, with the first invention of the wheel. But with the start of segregation, some people weren't allowed onto trains that carried people very far. Trains are probably one of the fastest means of transportation that you could have without jets. So, to have people not allowed on the train was very bad. Trains weren't allowed to be used for black people during the time of segregation, and some special trains that did have their own rooms for black people had the rooms in such a poor state they didn't even have maintenance clean the rooms. Obviously, this was not a big problem for people back then, but now, in retrospect, it was probably one of the worst things they could have done. When I first heard this, I didn't think much. I've heard crueler things, I've said. But upon thinking of it, I realized how horrible it was. I thought at times I had ridden trains before, which is quite a lot actually. And I realized that the worst thing for me on the train was standing up, not being cramped in a very smelly one-room thing with almost no seats. I live with 3 other siblings, so I know what it's like to have to share and be given the worst to give up the best for others, and not always by choice. And I can relate with the citizens of the Negro community who had no say at all on what they were given, but just were tossed the leftovers of the white society. They did nothing at all to us to deserve this. Actually, they deserve so much more than they are given, for all the history of cruelness that they had. It is hard to connect yourself to these poor mistreated people when looking at the general surface of it. But if you dive deeper into the pond, you'll find the individual fish that reside there. You can find it so much easier to connect with the single. Perhaps we are looking at Black History the wrong way. Right now we celebrate it as a whole month, Black History Month. But why are we celebrating it? Why do we remember it? Shouldn't we be trying to patch up that rip in the jeans of good? Sometimes people try to cover up their mistakes so much that instead of covering it, they paint over it. And the paint is as noticeable as spilled red paint on your new jeans. So the question that's still in my mind is, why are we obsessed with trying to make our mistakes seem like history, instead of telling people not to do such bad things anymore?